All right, I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. This is the early warning signs of reading challenges, and we are so grateful for our partnership with the National Center on Improving Literacy. We have Kristen Kane here tonight. I'll tell you a little bit about her in a minute. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping while we kind of wait to see if others are going to log in. First of all, if you were with us last week, we have fixed our technical difficulties and we have got the chat box enabled so you can put your questions in there. I can ask Kristen as we go along. And then we will also have a survey at the end for you to fill out. Because our organizations are grant funded, we really appreciate the feedback that families give us. It really helps us to improve the programs and the information that we provide to our families. My name is Amanda Raymond. I am an IEP Family Support Specialist here at PTSI. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about PTSI to get started. We are a statewide nonprofit. We are Virginia's parent training center and have been for over 45 years. Our mission is to empower families who have children with disabilities to navigate special education and disability services. We really focus on empowering families with the tools and the information that they need to be able to better advocate for their children. All of our services are free and confidential. We provide these services in a variety of ways through workshops like this one. I spend a lot of my time doing individual consultations over the phone, over Zoom, communicating with families via email to share resources. So we have a variety of ways that we reach families. We actually doubled our staff. I think it was almost 2 years ago now, July of 2024. We had some legislation from the state that put some funding into our PTI to hire extra staff. So we now have staff in each region, superintendent's region of the state. And we can offer things like community office hours, which you can find on our website. Okay, so we want to try to come to you. So all of that being said, please reach out to us if you need support or that individual support. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by introducing our presenter tonight. Again, we are so grateful to have the National Center on Improving Literacy to present this information. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Kristen. She is the Deputy Director of the National Center on Improving Literacy, or NCIL, where she leads work on family engagement and literacy support. NCIL is a national resource center funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and it's housed at Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development that provides evidence-based tools and support for families, educators, and education agencies. Prior to her role, Kristen spent more than a decade working in education and advocacy with a strong focus on family engagement, special education, and dyslexia awareness. She served as a family support specialist with Virginia's Parent Educational Advocacy Training Center, or PCE, so here with us, and has contributed to dyslexia and literacy policy at both state and federal levels. She was a senior advisor for the Office of Early Childhood Development in the Administration for Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Kristen is a founding member of Decoding Dyslexia Virginia and has served as director of the nonprofit Friends of Decoding Dyslexia Virginia. In her personal life, she is a parent to 4 children, two whom have dyslexia, and that experience has informed much of her work in literacy and family engagement. She holds a BS in psychology and has an additional certification in Orton Gillingham literacy instruction. So we are really excited to have her here tonight. Don't forget to put your questions in the chat, and I'm going to turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Amanda. It's always, I said this last week, it's always interesting to hear someone read your bio and you're like, I did all that. I did do
You
all that.
did.
Um, I'm curious if let's test the chat. Is there anybody returning from last week? This is a second part of a 2-part series that we were doing. So you can let us know. Lori, thank you for joining again. For those who were not here, we had a bit of technical issues. I appreciate everyone, well, number one, hanging on and coming back. I am hoping that we have, tackled all those. We're going to move on to the second segment of this workshop, and I've talked to Amanda and Tammy. We're going to re-record that the last week's, and so that hopefully they can raise that up on maybe their YouTube or their website, and we'll get through all of you'll get to have access to it. So we got through a lot of it, but we did miss a little bit of it, and so I will make time to re-record those. So let me share my screen here really quick with our um, slides for tonight. So in tonight's presentation, we're going to move from, your child's reading development to exploring a little bit more of what the warning signs are for reading challenges, and then what you can do as a parent or family member, caregiver, to sort of impact at home when there might be some challenges. Um, Before I jump into the content, I'm going to take a page from Amanda's book and just tell you a tiny bit about the center. We are federally funded through the U.S. Department of Ed and housed at BU. We are our mission Our mission is to increase access to and use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. So that's what we do. We do that as a partnership. We work hand in hand with Florida State University and RMC Research Corp. They are two of our partnering organizations, and we do that through translating research. So we take the newest and evidence-based research and we translate that into usable resources and services that our audiences would be able to use. So, and then our audiences include parents, parent organizations like PTSI, states, districts, schools, educators. And so with a mind's eye on what does the research say and how does that audience need to use it or digest it, that's the focus that we take as we're trying to create resources. And I tell you this because and maybe Amanda would agree with me, but when these centers are funded and we have a scope of work as general as kind of this, and what I'm telling you is to translate resource, that we can interface with our audiences or our stakeholders or those that we are meant to serve and be provided feedback. And so as you engage or if you utilize the National Center on Improving Literacy's website and you say, I really could use something that would help me navigate this piece of literacy, and I see things on this and I see things on that, reach out to us. We're here to serve, and we want to make sure that our mission and the people that we serve for that mission have what they need. And again, you'll see at the end there's a website and there's a contact us and there's an email. It all goes to me and my interim director, Sarah Seiko. So if you choose to use our general inbox, know that I will receive those. So children who struggle to learn early literacy skills are at risk for reading and academic difficulty later. Being informed about those parts of literacy, how children learn to read, why they may struggle, can help you make better decisions. So that's my goal tonight. My goal tonight is to sort of try to one, demystify or sort of break down what is happening when your child is learning to read, name those components or those foundational skills, and help provide terminology that you can feel comfortable utilizing in conversations with your school or your teacher in conferences or IEP meetings. When we are better informed, or when we can own some of that jargon and language, we can participate or feel like we're actually asking the right questions or moving towards information that's actually going to make impact in what we want to see happen with our child's literacy development, and potentially any difficulties or challenges or disabilities. I think I mentioned this last time. I'll mention this again. This workshop is part of a series. There is not only a series within this, like I'm here for the second time doing a second piece of this Learn Your Child's Reading Development. There are also 4 other series or units of study that we have put together that also look at how families can partner with schools, how families can support their children, and how families can advocate, and also a self-advocacy one. So there's actually another component of the advocacy one. So there's multiple sort of units to these workshops that we have available and that are geared for families to either use or lift as Pizzi has to come in and train families. So some of the learning objectives, this looks like a lot. We're going to go through a lot of things, hopefully not run out of time, but these are broken down. We're gonna hit all of these things tonight. We're going to learn evidence-based information on the reasons why your child might struggle to read. We're going to look at how to improve ability to determine if your child is receiving effective reading instruction or practices in school. We're going to talk about that. We're going to learn how to interact with children in a way that support and monitor their language and reading development. We're going to learn evidence-based information on the signs of risk for reading disability in children at different ages, improve the ability to determine whether children have reading difficulties, and learn how to interact with children in ways that support and monitor their reading development. We will probably touch a little bit on dyslexia. We have full multi-hour trainings on dyslexia itself. I'm happy to answer questions about dyslexia. As Amanda mentioned, you can pop questions in the chat at any time. I don't mind sort of stopping and reviewing segments of information live while we're going through it. We don't have to wait till the end, but you can wait to the end if you want. So on tonight's agenda, we're going to start with why a child might struggle to read, and then we're going to move into the signs of risk for reading reading difficulties. So why might a child struggle to read? We touched on this last week a little bit. Reading's a complex process, and it is not natural. It is not a natural occurrence for children to learn how to read. It is, we talked about last week, it's natural for a child to speak, to the verbal communication, regardless of language. This is a naturally occurring process for children's development, but reading is not. It's culturally developed, and so it has to be taught. There are foundational skills that we talked about last week that are required to master, to become a fluent or a fluent reader. Okay, for those of us who joined us last week, we're going to try a video. And this is Margie Gillis. For those of you, before I start her video, which is very short, for those of you, a trusted resource that the National Center would recommend is Understood. If you haven't found Understood, it's understood.org, and they have a lot of family-friendly resources, including things like videos and infographics similar to ours, but they are an ally in this space, and they've done a lot of work to create resources for families. So we're going to play Margie Gillis, who is a expert in this field, and we're going to cross our fingers. I have a backup if it crashes, but we're going to play it, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Please let us know if you have any trouble hearing.
Learning to speak and understand language is natural for most human beings. We are biologically wired to do that, and it is part of our human heritage. We're born to do that, and unless we have some language problem that we're born with, we acquire language just by being exposed, by being with caregivers, parents, siblings, peers that surround us with language, and it's just magical to see it unfold. Learning to read, on the other hand, is a cultural invention. So our brains just don't come with that wiring. And it's relatively recent, 5,000 years, that we've had a system that actually represents spoken language. We didn't have, an alphabet. We wouldn't be able to convey our thoughts and to perpetuate, ideas. So it's a wonderful thing, but it's a challenging thing, because what we have to do is to use areas of the brain, left hemisphere, that are really wired for humans to acquire language, and we have to build a neurocircuitry to be able to skillfully, automatically, effortlessly pull words off the page while making meaning. And for some children, that is just a very difficult thing to do. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with exposure. It has everything to do with, I was born with this brain. And skilled reading instruction will address those neurobiological differences.
Kristen,
Yes.
just really quickly, if we have more videos, I'm so happy that that one worked. But if we have more videos, do you have a way to turn up your volume? It was a little low.
Oh, okay. I will turn up my volume. I'm not sure if it was that one in particular, or if me turning up my volume is helpful on this side.
And we'll give it a try. And if we have to, we can always give the links to the videos in the follow-up email that I send later.
Okay, yes, I will do that. I will send over all of the links to the videos. I will also send over all of the links to any handout or resource that I discussed today. Okay, so last week we talked about the 5 components. One of those foundational components or skills that needs to be taught is phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is we represent this as an umbrella of skills that need to be taught to master phonological awareness. Word level reading, symbol level identification, or syllable level, onset and rhyme level. And what I've highlighted here is phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness, they consider this one of the most advanced skills of phonological awareness. This is taking a sound and knowing what the sound is that corresponds with a letter. So saying to your child, what letter makes the sound, right? This is one of the hardest things for them to do. It's one of the earliest skills that needs to be developed, along with phonics, which is the flip of that. Can I look at a letter and tell you what sound it makes? I included this terminology check of encoding. This is so when we're talking with schools or teachers, and we are in a conference at the beginning of the year, and we're going to review screening information. The screening has happened in the fall. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk to the teacher, and the teacher is going to tell us that things look good. We have some concerns. This is where terminology starts to come into play. Encoding is referring to phonemic awareness. It's saying, can a child, when they hear words, know what letters go with those sounds. And can we put them together and know that those sounds represent letters and make a word? Again, I want to make sure you have terminology that helps bridge conversations in the classroom. Phonemic awareness is a foundational skill that's needed to read. When we talk about it with a school, sometimes we utilize words like encoding. There is a deficit in encoding. We are not going from the sound to the letter, which when we see issues with encoding, this is when we say the spelling looks, I don't understand why they can say the word, but then when they go to write it, we have something that doesn't spell. So it impacts the writing component of reading. Okay, we've got another video. I've turned my sound up. Let me know in the chat if this is an improvement.
Children with reading issues often struggle to connect letters to sounds or to rhyme words. Learning how sounds fit together to make words is a critical step toward becoming a good reader and speller. This is often a big issue for kids with dyslexia. That's why it's important to help your child practice these skills often and in a way that's fun and low stress for both of you. For example, you might see the letters C and H on the handles of a faucet while you're helping your child wash up. You can say, look, this handle says C because it's the cold water. Cold. Can you think of other words that start with a k sound? Or at the grocery store, you can make a game out of looking for items that start with the same sound as your child's name. Rhyming's easy to work into everyday life, too. Just singing rhyming songs together is a terrific way to help your child have fun with rhyme. Also, if you're out and about and your child points out, for example, a cat, you can suggest that you try to see how many words you can both think of that rhyme with cat. Take this idea one step further by helping your child break apart the sounds in words. So you can say, hey, there's a chair. What word would we have if we took away the ch from chair? When your child figures out that the answer is air, then ask, what word would you make if you added a h sound to the beginning of air? You can keep going from there. Don't be afraid to include nonsense words like splort or quiggle. Silly words make this fun and still reinforce the important idea that sounds can be added or removed from words to change them. When kids are struggling to learn the basics of early reading, reducing their frustration is really important. Try ideas like these to encourage your child to be silly together and to enjoy language and wordplay. And if your child continues to struggle with things like rhyming and sound deletion games, talk to your child's teacher. There are also some really helpful apps you can find on Understood's Tech Finder tool. With the right kind of instruction at school and support at home, your child can start to make progress and become a better reader.
So this one always brings me back to when my son was I was figuring out what was going on with my son. They always say hindsight, these were things that as a parent I was noticing, but really didn't have any concept of that this could be leading to a potential diagnosis of dyslexia or reading difficulty. They were things that when he was little that I would just think like, I mean, I was really confused. He had an older sister who sort of just flew through her ABCs. She was super talkative. She was 2.5 years older than him. And then I had this little boy who I would ask to say the ABCs, and he would say, go ask Hannah, which was his older sister. And I would ask him to play a rhyming game with me, and he couldn't master it. We began discussions with the school fairly early, even though I didn't know what was going on. But it wasn't until maybe a couple of years into those discussions that I was sort of introduced to like all of these warning signs that, he checked a box. If there were 10, he checked 11 of them. So I have a little game here just for us to practice what the last presenter or the last video was talking about. If we use the word pen, and give me some words that start with p, and this is how we would play this game. We would say, name some words that start with p. So go ahead and put a few, if you are able to, into the chat. And then we're going to rhyme with pen. If you have a minute, you can add a few. What words rhyme with pen? This is, my son could not do this at all. I used to play this game. I'll tell you, I would say things like knee, bee, and he would look at me like I had two heads, and I would try to start for him. I would say tr, tr, like this, trying to get him to say a word that rhymed with B and knee. And he would look at me and he would say train. And I would say, I had no understanding of where that was coming from, and he was trying so hard to please me. And but rhyming was not something that he could do. He couldn't do it. And then after we have these words that rhyme with pen, I want to see if I can peek at the chat while I'm still on. I see hen. I see other words I see Ben. I see other P words, paint, pink, pal, when. Nice, very nice. And so once we do this sort of rhyming one, and then we can ask, what sound did we replace when we created a rhyming word? So this is getting to that, what sounds do these letters make, and can I isolate them? Can the child isolate those sounds? Can we say, I replaced the p with a w. I replaced the p with a b. This is practice that we can do at home that is absolutely translational and practices the skills that we're talking about with phonemic and phonological awareness. So we know that children can also struggle with decoding. I feel like this is something that those that are, walking this path or in this journey, we hear this a lot. We have to be able to decode words. What does that mean? And we hit encoding first, because I think sometimes it's a term that's a little less sort of focused on, but still so important. And decoding is the flip of encoding. If we can pull the sound and identify the letter, the decoding part is, can we see the letter and know what sound goes with it? And we need this. We need decoding skills. We need to be able to look at a letter, know what that sound is. And I think I talked about this last time. There are 26 letters in the English alphabet, and there are 44 sounds. So it is not, and we all know this, right? I mean, we know most of them. We know vowels have long and short sounds, but the automaticity of knowing what sounds that those letters make help us decode words. And when we can decode words with mastery and quickly, this moves us from sounding out and word level reading to fluent readers where we can make sense of our sentence structure or our paragraph or our story that we're reading. So we also know children may have trouble. They may be able to encode and decode, and they might be able to read fluently. And then we get to the end of the story and we don't have any comprehension of what we just read. So we know that comprehension is also an area where children might struggle. I will make sure that you have access to this resource. This is a resource produced by the Meadow Center. And basically, two of the strategies that they have on here is that when you're reading together at home, you would ask and answer questions. And you can start if you're reading together, you can start those ask and answer early on. You don't have to read the whole thing and then ask and answer. You can read a paragraph or read a few sentences and ask a question. And then they make a suggestion, which I think is great. Is they call them narrow questions and wide questions. A narrow question would have like a singular answer, like, did the boy buy a ball or an apple? And there's an answer to that. And a wide question example might be, what was the boy struggling with as he carried home his groceries? And so they've got to kind of put together a little bit more of the story to be able to answer those wide questions. And then identifying main idea. One of the pieces of this strategy around potential comprehension issues is that when you're working at home, give the answer, right? Pose the question, let the child have, let your child have some time to think, and then give them the answer. We're working on comprehension. We're not testing, right? We're trying to see, can we make those connections, and if they haven't made them and we make them for them, can they learn from that as they're moving through the story? One caveat I will say to comprehension is that comprehension requires mastery of our other skills. And so while I wouldn't advise against having, focusing on comprehension as a potential struggle or issue or goal, that we want to make sure that we have in place decoding and encoding and our phonological awareness and our phonemic awareness. We want to make sure that those skills are mastered, and we are talking about a comprehension issue. We can struggle with comprehension if we cannot decode words, if we cannot read fluently. And so making sure that as we move into, say, a goal or a focus on comprehension, that has data that supports that our other foundational skills have been mastered. So some of our potential struggles around comprehension can be our building of our vocabulary. So I think I have to jump. This one is not clicking. This is a quick video on activities you can do at home to build vocabulary, and then we'll have a little activity together to, let me see if I can jump over there really quick.
Families play a vital role in nurturing children's vocabulary. In fact, vocabulary development begins early, before children even start reading. Evidence shows that exposure to a rich vocabulary at home and engaging in conversations with adults sets the stage for a strong word foundation as children enter school. But vocabulary isn't just about knowing words. It's about understanding their meanings and using them correctly. Knowing a word's meaning helps with comprehension. If a word is decoded, but a child doesn't understand its meaning, comprehension may suffer. Let's go through the 4 types of vocabulary and review some easy activities parents can do at home. The first type is listening vocabulary, which is defined as knowing the meaning of words heard in your spoken language, such as understanding instructions and conversations. To foster listening vocabulary, browse through some photos together. Look at one photo at a time and describe it. Then ask follow-up questions that start with who, what, when, where, and why, and have your child respond. The second type is speaking vocabulary, which is knowing meanings of words used in your spoken language to be able to express thoughts and ideas in conversations. To improve speaking vocabulary skills, gather items from around the house. Look at each item one at a time and describe it. Then ask follow-up questions that start with who, what, when, where, and why, and have your child respond. The third type is reading vocabulary, which means knowing the meanings of words while reading and leads to comprehension. To improve comprehension, take out an article or book. Ask your child to find a word they don't know, then define the word and talk about how the word can be used in sentences. The final type is writing vocabulary, which is defined as understanding the meanings of words in written communication. To improve writing vocabulary skills, have your child make up and write their own stories, keep a journal, or make to-do lists using new words. You can also have your child keep a list of new vocabulary words and add to it every day. Have your child write out the new word, then draw a picture of what it means, and write examples. Most of all, don't forget to make vocabulary fun. Things like idioms, analogies, tongue twisters, and rhymes can help. So does reading aloud daily, and emphasizing the excitement of learning new words. Communicating an appreciation and love for words can go a long way in your child's vocabulary development.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell a little story about vocabulary building. I did a session with a group called Parent Camp, and Parent Camp, if you've not ever heard of it, it's a little different of a format, and they call it the non-conference or non-presentation. So basically, just for context, you come in as a facilitator and you let the conversation lead, and you support that conversation as a content expert, but you don't lead the conversation. You let the families lead the conversation, and you're there to support and provide guidance and content expertise. And I did one not too long ago, and I had a mom who English was her second language, and her daughter, who was 7, was having some difficulty reading, but was, as her mom put it, a better reader than her mom was of English. And her mom felt worried and concerned about her ability to read aloud to her child at night, because she didn't think she could do a good job, and she felt embarrassed that she couldn't pronounce words. And we talked through it. It was a really interesting conversation. The mom was really motivated and wanted to be part of this activity of reading aloud, but was struggling. And we talked about the value of building vocabulary, even if she wasn't able to pronounce certain vocabulary words accurately. And so, as we kind of unpacked this for her, we landed on that while she wanted to decrease her use of technology, phones, at the time of reading, and kind of felt like she didn't want to have someone else reading to her child, that she could utilize technology to help with her pronunciation of vocabulary, and they could do it together. And so as she left, she was more empowered to go and read aloud, and she was going to bring sort of Google with her to help her and her daughter with pronunciation of vocabulary words that were unfamiliar to both her and her daughter. I think that's I don't know. I thought it was a really great conversation, and I share it with you that as parents that parents too struggle or can struggle as well with reading, and but have high hopes and goals for their children to be fluent readers, and there's ways to figure out how we can do that and be good role models for our children. At last week's, we did talk a little bit about vocabulary. We also talked about oral language. This is another, you heard this in some of these activities where, while the focus is around vocabulary, you could identify that there was an oral language piece, there was a print reading piece that builds vocabulary, and then there was a writing component. These are all interconnected. So one of the activities that we do sometimes out when we're doing like sort of exhibit booths or working with families is I will have picture cards out, and we'll talk about or model how we can build vocabulary with picture books. And the nice thing about sort of picture cards is that they can be used from our little ones to through oral language all the way up to our big ones, and utilize potential picture cards to build vocabulary through writing. So in the chat, I've got a picture up next to the video, and I'd love for you to utilize the chat to put in words that describe or talk about this picture. And I guarantee you this is going to show how much vocabulary we could build around just this one picture. So I'll give you a minute, and then we'll chat about it a little bit. I see blue, I see pants, I see jeans. Tanya's got my indigo. I was going to come out with indigo, which is a great vocabulary word that would be unfamiliar sometimes. Distressed, worn, weathered. I think, Fun Friday, Friday jeans, right? So this is just an opportunity, comfortable zipper. Do we see how many vocabulary words that we can come up with in literally 15 seconds by looking at a picture that potentially would expose a child to vocabulary that they may not encounter just through conversation with their friends or their family or their brothers or sisters or even their parents? How often do we use the word indigo? It's a great word, right? And it's a stretchy leisure. So sometimes we can do this. We can do this while we're even reading together and looking at pictures within a book, and sort of build vocabulary that exposes them even orally to hearing these words and associating them, or having a picture to associate them with. Okay. I'm going to briefly touch on these. I kind of touched on this already. Children might struggle to read because English is a new language. I just sort of shared that story about that mom and her little girl. This is a reason why children might struggle. There are services within school that are dedicated to our children that are English learners. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about and is print concept. And they may struggle to read. I didn't talk about this much last week, but it is included on that reading rope. If you remember the reading rope, that talks about all of the different areas that need to be mastered in order to become a fluent reader. Print concept is one of those things. Do we know how a book is utilized? Do we know that we read from left to right? Do we know that we hold a book a certain way? These are all print concepts that they have to be taught. They're not necessarily natural. I mean, they can be modeled, and some children will pick it up. And I will tell you, my daughter, my youngest, who is also dyslexic, loved to carry around books. So she had her profile was a little different than my son. She actually had some pretty good spelling encoding abilities. Her decoding was not so great. Her fluency was very impacted. She's in college, and she's still impacted, and has additional time on some of her projects, her writing projects, and her test taking. But she used to carry around her book, and she would say, "I can read this one. I know it so well, Mom. I can read it with my eyes closed." So she had memorized the book. She might actually even hold that book upside down when she read it to me aloud, because she knew it so well. So print concepts, knowing how a book works, how print works, how we engage with it is another thing. Um, Here's where we find ourselves many times at school in our conversations. Does the instruction and needs match? We talked a little bit about this last week. Instruction needs to be explicit. It needs to be direct, step by step, tell you exactly what you need to know, and how to do it. Systematic means that it follows a sequence, including how we teach the skills, which skills we teach first, and they go from easier to more difficult. Part of that systematic instruction should include progress monitoring. So if we're teaching something in a sequence, we need to make sure that the skills that we taught last week are mastered before we move on to the new skills. And if we've got we should also be going back and checking as we introduce. We've got mastery, and we've introduced a new skill, and now we've got two skills. We go back, we make sure that we're still holding on to that first skill. We call them foundational skills because they are built. We build on them. And if you have a shaky foundation, it's going to cause gaps in your reading progress, and your progress with those skills. Is there a mismatch? Do we have information that says what's happening in the classroom, and what your child needs is actually not aligned? We have and this is a resource that we have that sort of sets up a framework that you sort of learn about the school's system of support. You review what's going on, where your child fits. You record what information and communication is given. Do you have screening results? Do you have homework and things that are coming home that you can see? You can talk to other families. You can talk to your school, request additional information about what's happening. And then if you are still having issues, you can refer. And Pizzi is there to help you through this process as well, on how to sort of move through a process that says if there is more than what is offered in the general ed classroom, when a child is impacted by a reading disability, is there a need for more, which would be special education. So let's jump over to we're kind of transitioning over to, like, what if we have reading difficulties, or we suspect that there is something more going on. These are some signs of reading difficulty. And again, this should support what we just talked about. Do we notice that there is difficulties with the development of phonological awareness and phonological processing skills? We talked about this. Is there difficulty rhyming? Is there difficulty with accurately decoding words, nonsense or unfamiliar words count in that as well? Can we apply the ability to decode to words we definitely don't know? Reading words in isolation. Sometimes you will see a diagnostic test or a screening test called word attack, and it kind of flashes words up. And can they just read them with no context around them, no picture, no other words, nothing that that sort of gives them context of what that word might be. Oral reading, when they read aloud, it can be, there's a lot of inaccuracies, or it takes a long time. It's very choppy. That would be lack of fluency. You can hear a child sort of read. Remember my children, it's like one word at a time. They're expending so much energy to decode that by the time they get to the end of that sentence, they don't even know what the sentence was. Spelling, you will also may have experience if you've had an evaluation with rapid automatized naming. There is some screenings that include rapid automatized naming. I believe Virginia's does. The PALS does include some of that. That's another area that would potentially be impacted. Doesn't have to be impacted, but could potentially be impacted. So these are just some of the warning signs or signs that you might be looking for. And as a parent, I would say the more of these that you see, the more likely that there is going to be reading issues. Screening and assessment. I just want to go over what a screening is and what it isn't. It's an assessment that helps teacher identify students at risk of not meeting grade level goals. Most screeners are not diagnostic, but they can identify red flags and should be able to help a teacher either know where they need to look more deeply and provide enough data to sort of inform what needs to happen with instruction next. Components of a good screener, which I know Virginia has these components, but I don't do this only in Virginia, but the screening instrument should address all components of foundational reading. Phonemic awareness, you hear me say this, I don't know how many times in the last 2 weeks, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. These are, and so I tell you this, so when you have a conversation, if you have concerns, these are the questions you can ask. Can you tell me when, on our fall screening, how did my child do on the phonics component of the screener? Sometimes now in Virginia, there's some laws that kind of wrap around what parent notification should, and these subtests should be being communicated to families. I don't know if they are everywhere, but they should be. And so hopefully some of you will have this information. Other families are sometimes given composite scores. This is scores of all of these subtests averaged together. And sometimes a child who has a reading difficulty, particularly dyslexia, is one where there could be some really big deficits on their phonemic awareness, but they've got a good vocabulary and potentially can infer what the comprehension is, and they may get some of these things with a higher score that may make them look average, but when you pull them apart, it tells a different story and where potential instruction or intervention is actually needed. So here's some questions. Oh my gosh, I'm talking a lot, and we're getting to the end. We have about five minutes. So these are some questions. I will make sure I provide this to you. This is also a handout. This helps you get to sort of productive conversations about what's happening in the classroom, what's happening with instruction, what's happening with the screener, how teachers or classrooms are utilizing that data to inform what needs to happen with your child. See if this one plays. It's a quick one. It's a minute.
In second and third grade, most kids read smoothly, at a natural speed, and with expression. It's important to understand the warning signs of a learning issue. The earlier a learning issue is detected, the better chance a child will have of succeeding in school. It's important to know that children with learning disabilities just process information differently. Ask yourself, 1. Is your child making a lot of errors when reading and the task of reading seems to be very difficult? 2. Is their spelling not connected to the sounds they hear in words? Often there are wild guesses as to how a word is spelled. 3. Has the teacher mentioned it takes your child a long time to copy from the board? 4. Does your child struggle to follow along as you or the teacher reads a story aloud? Do they seem distracted or like their minds are wandering? If you read them a story and they have no understanding of what happened, that's a warning sign that there might be a problem. The earlier you can get help for your child, the better. Teachers are only with your child for 9 months, but parents may have observed and sensed the problem over the course of years. Don't hesitate to ask for help and not be satisfied until there is a solution in place. Whether that means a school evaluation, private tutoring, or a reading evaluation with a licensed child psychologist.
So here are some additional resources that I can share with you on dyslexia specifically. Many of those warning signs that I shared with you earlier correspond to these and for children with dyslexia. One of the resources we have sort of breaks it out into what you could expect at certain ages. Again, I shared a little bit about my son at 3 to 5. For my daughter, we were doing lots of nursery rhymes and rhyming and things like that. And this was not something he was able to master when he was 3 to 5 years old. And so it kind of goes through. And I think it's helpful because sometimes we don't really know what's going on, and then we get to school, and so we're looking at different ages and what those signs look like. So I will definitely share those with Amanda to share out with all of you. Dyslexia is brain-based. It is not something you outgrow. This shows a section of the left hemisphere of the brain, very simplified, and this is just to let you know that with appropriate intervention, that this is the piece of the brain that's needed to read fluently, and that with intervention, appropriate intervention, we can build this piece that is not as highly utilized in a, it's a very simplified view, but intervention, appropriate intervention does help build the wiring and pathways for children to become more fluent in their reading. We are running out of time. This was another, it's very quick. Think about what you've learned about your child's reading development to help John. John has a son who avoids reading out loud and says that reading is hard. What can John look or listen for when helping his son that might explain his feelings about reading? Choose the answer that fits best. I'll read these. Has trouble noticing and playing with individual sounds in spoken words. Has trouble reading like you talk instead of word by word. Has trouble spelling words correctly. Has trouble sounding out unknown words. Or all of the above. Feel free to add that to the chat. And I know Wendy's got it. All of the above. So I want to thank you all for joining. This was much smoother than last week. Thank you for coming back and being part of this second part of this series. Are there any questions And again, you're welcome to email me or Amanda, and we'll get answers. I have a few from last week that I'm working on that I will get back to you. And then last but not least, before I stop sharing, this is the evaluation that Amanda mentioned. We both of our centers as federally funded centers are very appreciative of feedback. It helps guide what we do, and it helps us with our annual reports and all of those good things.
Absolutely. And we are really appreciative of Kristen and NCIL coming to give this information to our families. Take your time, complete this evaluation. If you have any other quick questions, put them in the box. Kristen, we do have one. How is dyslexia identified in schools?
Sure. So so let's
It's a
talk
loaded
about it.
question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but let's talk about it in terms of if we were to need an IEP. Because we have dyslexic children. Let me just say this. Dyslexic children are most likely in every classroom, and they may or may not be served by special education. They may or may not need special education. We kind of talked a little bit about how parents attempt to what resources are at their disposal to address what might be going on, and how impactful is it for that child. So let's talk about it as if it is a child who needs special education. If a child has dyslexia and requires special education, we would be referring them to, in public school, we would be referring them for an evaluation. A diagnostic evaluation would be done with a school team, and when that referral is made, you would request, you would say you suspect that there is a disability in reading, potentially dyslexia. That helps inform that child psych team or that evaluation team on what they should be testing for. You will have a meeting with the team prior to the evaluation going into effect, and you can contribute at that time with the things that you see happening, right? You can even contribute that my pediatrician thinks my child has dyslexia, and this will help inform. Then there are a number of diagnostic tests that will be run for dyslexia in an evaluation. I'm going to caveat that by saying there are no dyslexia tests. There are tests that point to deficits that we talked about earlier in here: word level reading, phonological awareness. These are signs of dyslexia, or these are pieces that of an evaluation that point to a child has dyslexia. There's no dyslexia test. So that would be how we identify it. There are private evaluations that do the same thing, and if there are not needs for special education, you may see a child with dyslexia served through a 504, and they might be served in general education if they've gotten potentially intervention before or outside of school, and they're able to access the core curriculum without supports.
Yeah, and as Kristen, has talked about, she's really describing that referral to eligibility process. So if anybody, wants to talk individually about your situations, you can always call Pizzi. We are here to help. We have highly trained staff that are able to, gather more information from you about your individual situation so that we can help you walk through what questions you need to ask, whether it's the child study team or at your eligibility meeting, what information you can consider sharing. So that whole process, that's our job, is to give you the information you need so that you can go in and advocate for your child. So please give us a call. You can find our contact information on our website. It's just pizzi.org, www.pizzi.org, and we are happy to help. I don't see any other questions right now in the chat box, but I did put my email in there. So if anybody thinks of anything, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll do my best to either respond or get with Kristen and get those answers. And again, we're just really excited that Kristen was able to partner with us to give you guys all of this information. And I hope that it was beneficial for everyone. And we were really just glad to have you join us tonight. All right.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and this is my work, and I love to talk about it. So thank you for joining me tonight.
Yes. And just one more quick housekeeping thing. We did record this. In fact, I have to stop recording, which I will do right now.